So the what I'm going to talk about today is how the internet can influence public life in the future, and more pertinently, how it can influence getting more women into public life. So that's the what. The how is that this is going to be an interactive session. As well as being a psychologist, I am an app developer, possibly the oldest app developer in the world, certainly the oldest female app developer in the world. You can buy my apps at the App Store, stay calm, stay cool. App developers know that people change and develop through interaction, not just listening to me droning on about my theories about life, the universe, and everything else. So this will be interactive, although we've only got half an hour, so I'm going to talk real fast. Why I'm talking about it, I just read this amazing book, actually, which I recommend to anybody who's mildly interested in leadership, called Start With Why. And it's a book that is about why do some people lead much more effectively than others? Why do companies lead much more effectively than others? And what it says is that if we can answer why we want to lead and why we want to make something happen, then we get a truth and integrity behind what we do. And I thought, I'm going to face up to this and ask myself, why am I here today? And there's a couple of reasons, actually. And the first one is a very obvious one. I'm absolutely mad about the internet, and I will tell you a bit more about that, what I do on the internet a bit later. But the other why is a much more personal one. And it's to do with me wanting really good people, especially really good women in public life. Because I'm going to tell you a very short story now about one woman being let down by another woman in public life. So my mother had mental health problems, bad ones, throughout all my childhood. And in Carmarthen, where I lived, and some of you may know the person I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to mention their name, there was a doctor, a woman doctor, who was preeminent, if you like, if you can be such a thing, in Carmarthen's public life. She was a magistrate, she was on the board of governors of the schools, she was a counsellor, and she had 3 kids. And all this meant, in my book, that she couldn't do her job properly. So for 15 years, my father asked this doctor for help with my mother's mental health problems, and we never got it. And what happened, what this culminated in, was when my father died, the house was awash with Valium, Mogadon, all different types of alcohol, you know. The doctor came, my mother lost it totally. Tried to beat up my husband, who is 6'1", it's not a very good decision, and originates from Ponty, even worse decision. So the doctor was called. And the doctor came to the house and I said, you know, I'm really concerned about my mother's mental state, as we had been telling her for 15 years. And, you know, you've been prescribing over-liberally Valium and Mogadon. And she turned around to me and she said, yes. And you're one of these people who believes much too much of what they read in the Sunday Times and the Observer. So my mother continued on this path for another, 4 or 5 years. Eventually, round about this time of the year, actually, she went up to her sister's house, armed with cushions, so there's premeditation here, and a pile of bricks in the boot of the car, a couple of weeks before Christmas, started lobbing cushions at the bay window of the house. Didn't get any reaction to this, so then she chucked the bricks. Was arrested, taken down to the police station in Carmarthen, and the doctor was called. The doctor was put into the cells, and my mother beat her up really badly. And the next day, my brother had a phone call saying, you know these problems you've been talking about for 20 years now with your mother? You're quite right, she needs to be sectioned and she needs help. So that was a woman who took too much on, actually, in my view, in public life. And I've gone on since, because I hate these stories that are all about poor old me, I've gone on to have an exceptionally happy adult life. And that's fantastic, But it has really, really made me think about what women do, actually, and the importance of support and development for women in public life. Because this woman couldn't hack it as a doctor. She might have been doing all these roles where she knew best what the people of Carmarthen wanted, and she was very much she knew best what other people needed type. But, when she came down to it, she obviously wasn't reading the latest in the BMA and the Lancet on how to deal with mental health issues and how to listen to patients' families when they ask you for help. So that's why I'm here, okay? Right, let's go. It's very serious. So those are some pixels, and now here are some Welsh women, and that's what we're here to talk about, this connection between the internet and Welsh women. And this is just my pictorial CV. These are some of the ne'er-do-goods that I have worked for. I worked in his closing months for John Major in number 10. I worked for the Prince of Darkness down there and have been on the receiving end of that look. I worked on the 97 election campaign for Labour. I coached over 100 of the MPs that got in and advised on motivation for volunteers and coached cabinet ministers. The very interesting thing about that campaign was that there was a woman who was incredibly responsible for all that. And very few people have heard of her. She was called Margaret McDonough. I think she's left public life now. I think her sister's still an MP, isn't she? Siobhan. And she didn't write a book about taking a part in it. You know, she didn't sort of schmooze with the circle of Alistair Campbell and Peter and all that. But she was an absolute heroine in terms of Labour Party history and actually getting that election. So there you go. I make stuff for clients, digital stuff. Recently, I've been doing work, as Rosemary said, at the Olympics. Merck are the world's largest pharmaceutical company. They don't manufacture in the UK now, but they have a charitable foundation to help women and children. And so quite a bit of this year I've spent doing research for them into the psychology of decision-making amongst teenagers, teenage girls in particular. And this was very interesting because it was another example of people who know best. Because, so I had to work with about 120 medical consultants who had decided the way to get teenage girls to take better contraceptive decisions was for them, the consultants, to give the girls motivational counselling. Now, you know, somebody's making a few bucks out of this, the motivational counselling. So what my research revealed was actually that teenage girls weren't going to give a toss about consultants taking them through these periods of motivational counselling. What they were much more likely to be influenced by was films made by other teenagers that were on MTV type films that were on Facebook. And this was a revelation to these doctors, an absolute revelation that you could go onto other people's patches, look at their media, look at the messages they received, and do this very cheaply. So, you know, so there you go. I'd just like to mention General Electric, who a lot of you will know are up in Nantgarw. They have a fantastic women's network. I mean, General Electric, you know, is a massive beast of a sort of American corporation, but it's at the front of a lot of interesting use of technology, interesting use of the web, and it has a fantastic women's network. About 100 Welsh women come together and host events for other women across the UK, and American women come over as well, and I think they're very good to link to. There's a young woman there called Tori James, who some of you will be familiar with. I think she's the first young woman to climb Everest, and certainly the first Welsh woman, so she works there, and she's fantastic. So there you go. Now, who I'm most grateful to on there, John Lewis, because they've been my biggest client for about 20 years. 5 years ago, they asked me, they had a .com that was very successful because people trusted the name John Lewis, and they wanted to integrate it more into the main business. The main business has got 79,000 people in it. And so they said to me, will you go up to London to this bunker off the King's Road and help these .commers put themselves more at the heart of John Lewis? And I turned up there, and there were 300 kids, under 40, all in jeans, and I was, you know, this dumpy little housewife from Barry, 52. And I thought, this is professional suicide, actually, I'm embarking upon here. And I've got to do something about it. I have to pull a rabbit out of a hat. So what shall I do? So I thought, well, what does this business do at its core? Well, at the core, they were coding. So I thought, easy, I'll learn to code. I took myself off to Cardiff University, tried to learn to code. It was disastrous. Found a bunch of hippies and surfers who taught it in chapter, learned to code, started to make websites. And when I went into John Lewis, they were still thinking mad old bat, I know, but they were thinking mad old bat with respect. She can code. And that was the start of, that was a kind of revelationary time for me, really. I felt the internet is definitely as, you know, great a change as the printing press. There is fantastic potential on it that I think we should all be exploiting. So my job usually at core involves engaging people, involving them and experimenting with them. And I'd like you all to think about this word experiment. It is not used nearly enough. It's certainly not used enough in public life. You know, people are afraid to say, look, common people, this is an experiment we're trying here. We would like your feedback. But that's the way things grow and develop, through experimenting, you know, but people don't like the word. So there are far more initiatives and projects happening that could be called experiments and should honestly be called experiments than it actually happens. So, because people are worried that we might get unsettled by it. So just want to, you know, describe a little bit of what's going on. So we've got Twitter now. There are 9 million people in the UK reading newspapers, and 10 million people on Twitter, and 2 or 3 top companies using it, 7 out of every 10 governments. Of course, you can control the message that's sent on Twitter, but you cannot control how it will land, which is very worrying for people like these guys, you know, who want to have a controlled state. And of course, they're always falling out, aren't they, with the lords of the clouds. Now, and certain industries, and there are more than these, but these are the ones that I'm aware of, so this is not a definitive list, are under attack, you know, and need to change, are changing dramatically because of the digital world. And I've listed them there. And what's interesting about these, when I put them up, I thought, these are actually professions and areas where there is very high female employment. So, you know, a lot of us, a lot of you will be on the periphery, if you're not involved directly in this, are in these highly volatile sectors now. And of course, what also is under attack is protectionism and entitlement, you know. And anybody in public life who is trying to hide behind some sort of fortress mentality can look out, which is fantastic for us. Now, if we think about public life, you know, traditionally public life has been conducted in public space, hasn't it? So, you know, there are these fabulous suffragettes in New York in 1915. But public life has changed. You know, when I was preparing and thinking about this talk, I thought, where do I go now? What public spaces do I go to? Well, I'm in one today, which is really remarkable and unusual. But most of the time, I don't go into these public spaces because I don't go shopping and stuff like that. I might go meet a friend in a cafe or something, but I'm not in these public spaces. Why? Because I'm in a different public space. And it's this one. You know, so this is a conservative estimate now. In Wales, we've got, this is conservative from a few months back from Ofcom. We've got 700,000 users of Facebook in Wales, and we've got 25,000 Western Mail readers. So you would need 28 times the readership of the Western Mail to match Facebook. Okay. So that's something worth noting. And of course, power is shifting. You know, power is moving from old elites. There's the Freemasons up there. Though I'm not, I mean, I blog, right, but I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But Freemasons are still very powerful at a lot of the top of universities, for instance. And you see them moving around between government and a university. So, and, you know, goodness knows what will happen with the Savile inquiry and whether there'll be Freemason involvement there. I bet there will. So moving from people like that and moving from old media dynasties, and I've got a bad woman there, you know, the Lady Macbeth of News International, power is moving from those down to the Arab Spring and these guys, who are the lords of the clouds. Very, very rich, controlling things that happen online, you know, controlling access and controlling movement. So we are in a time of incredible dynamism in terms of power shifts and how people can get messages and movements moving, which is amazingly exciting. Now, just to talk a little bit, this is an illustration, a kind of bit of a cheeky one, of about how people can get rumbled on Twitter. So a few weeks ago, I was going to something run by Literature Wales on digital publishing, amongst other things. And I went onto Twitter and I thought I would look at Literature Wales' Twitter stream and see if they're giving out details of this seminar. So I went onto this Twitter stream and I thought, this is peculiar. These are the tweets I'm reading. Over the coming week, Literature Wales will be relocating to a new office building in Cardiff Bay. What else is taxpayers' money for? And then, reminder, if you are on the list of usual names, why not apply for a bursary? No book required. Just collect cash and pass go. And I thought, hang on a minute, they can't be putting these tweets up on themselves. No, they can't, because this is an alternative Literature Wales. And as far as I can tell, it has been set up by a group of disaffected poets in Merthyr, probably of which there are many, and is rumbling the actual Literature Wales. So, you know, there is no hiding place, is there? And I don't expect they're going to sue each other, because that would be quite unseemly. Now, let's move to this, and we're going to talk quite a bit about this, because psychology is involved in this. So this is the photo that the Obama campaign put out on his victory night. And on Monday or Tuesday this week, it's probably much more now, it had had 816,000 tweets and 4.5 million links. So 4.5 million people across the world. What's the population of Wales? About 3 million. Yeah, so, you know, us and a half had decided to tweet this photo, which is quite something, actually. So, now, it's stuck here. Oh, I'm going forward now, hold on. So, this is about reach and influence. And I want each of you now to check in here with your own reach and influence. I am making an assumption, and I might be wrong about this, but I would hope I'm not, that everybody in this room either wants to increase her or her organisation's reach and influence, or help other women increase their reach and influence. So what I'd like you to just mention now to your neighbour is, why do you want to do that? And who do you want to reach and influence? Can you just check in with each other, please? Why do you want to increase reach and influence? And if somebody at the back is looking a little bit perplexed, are you with that? Are you understanding? Why and who? All right, if you don't mind winding this up now, I got one other thing I'm going to ask you to do before the end of this turn. So I'm sorry if I've interrupted you mid-conversation, but, you know, finish it off in the next bit. Hold that thought. So what I thought it would be useful for us to do now, you know, is to generate a scenario, because I like to be practical and useful if I can. And I thought this scenario, what we could do is, I will take you through, bearing in mind what the Obama campaign recent victory used, through some of the steps that they will have taken, and hopefully you would be able to apply that in your own endeavours subsequently. And I thought, hypothetically, we would call this campaign the Welsh Women's, it's supposed to say Gobby Lobby, but lobby's gone. But anyway, it'll do as Welsh Women's Gobby, but it did say Welsh Women's Gobby Lobby, okay? Pretty good name for a website, eh? So here we go. So the first thing we'd need to do is to search, okay? We'd need to search online for women we could target to join this lobby. And I took 5 minutes, the clock is down there to remind me to tell you this, to do these searches. And I found out the following. I found out on total in LinkedIn. How many of you use LinkedIn here? Quite a few. It's very boring and tedious, isn't it? And full of people taking themselves seriously and bigging themselves up, but you still have to go there. So just a quick scan through LinkedIn showed these numbers. Women in Management South Wales 293, North Wales Women's Network 424, Equalities Wales 183, PR and Comms Wales 265, which gives you 1,000. Now, if you've got 1,000 names online, you can do something with that. That's kind of the minimum number. And sitting alongside that, and very quickly, I discovered on Facebook, Feminist Network, Inspiring Women, Women's Workshop, and a specific search. And I'll tell you a little bit more about about the specific search in a moment. Specific search was critical, actually, to the Obama campaign's success. Because what's happened when Obama won, Romney watched the stats coming in and said, you know, I can't believe it. There are people coming out to vote today that we didn't know exist. So how did the Democrats get these people who they didn't know existed to come out? Through Facebook. They targeted people who could be local community leaders and who could bring out their friends and relatives who didn't normally vote and got them down to the polls. So Facebook really, with the use of Facebook especially, won the last election in the US. And this is the type of search I would have conducted on Facebook. Some of you will be familiar with this. I will have tapped in people who live in the United Kingdom, people who live in Wales, 18 and older, and my hashtags will have been politics and gender equality. So I'll have narrowed down that everybody I'm targeting here, which is pretty good targeting in 5 minutes, isn't it, are in Wales and women, and they're interested in politics and gender equality. There you are. I've got my target group for my Gobby Lobby campaign. Now, some other things we learned from the Obama campaign. I'm just gonna tell you the story of it, actually. If those of you who follow politics a lot, and I know we've got a little politics star here I'm going to introduce you to later. But on October the 3rd, it was they did the first TV debate, you know, and Romney had debated 20 times over the previous year. Obama, as president, hadn't, because you don't get to debate in that way. And he was much sharper. And Obama actually said, we're getting bombed on Twitter because it was going so badly for them. And he also said, which is a great leadership trait, this is on me. He said that repeatedly to people. This is my fault. I have cocked up in this debate. And he decided that he was going to maybe give up a bit on likability and come across as a bit spiky. And so be it, and that's what he needed to do. And then they called in a group of behavioural scientists, which is the American word for psychologists. In fact, I'm going to call myself it because it sounds much more significant and serious. So I'm here today as a behavioural scientist. They got a group of the best behavioural scientists in the US together. They called themselves Corps, and they advised on the Obama campaign. And this is the sort of things that they got people doing. First of all, on social media, they had different team members running different streams with different voices. So, you know, the person who would be running the Twitter stream would have a different voice than the person who would be running the Facebook stream, because you've got slightly different demographics going there. You've got much more media people and snarky types going to Twitter than perhaps you have on Facebook. This is what they described their aims were. We always tried to be really human, to speak to people like we'd be spoken to, and never to go into speechiness. We actually had a list of banned words, like don't use words that only politicians use in speeches, with the exception of you, Rosemary, and don't be a douchebag, right? So that was the instructions. Now, the psychology behind it was as follows. First of all, people are much more likely to vote if you get them to plan to vote. So an email went out from Obama HQ to supporters saying people do things when they make plans to do them. What's your plan? That was the email. Not a vote Obama or anything like that, just what is your plan? People do things when other people in their neighbourhood, club, college, peer group do it. So messages would be pumped out saying, you know, we know that in your college, 97% of your fellow students are going to be voting for Obama. What can seem like very small things can influence voting success. For instance, you can send a message saying, will you vote tomorrow? Or you can send a message which says, will you be a voter tomorrow? If you send the will you be a voter tomorrow message, you will get 11% more people voting, which is quite a lot and can be significant. So that'll have been the message that will have gone out. It's more clumsy grammatically, but there is something significant, and we like the idea of I am going to play this role, which is significant. So rather than will you vote, it'll have been will you be a voter? And then overall in the tactics of campaign, when they'll have been targeting these community organisers, they'll have started off asking people to do something really small, and then they'll have built up their requests over the 3 weeks, getting more and more people involved. All this will sit alongside two key thrusts of their campaign. How do we make Obama appear competent and warm? And, you know, Michelle is a very good asset, possibly a greater asset than Obama in doing this. But these are the two qualities that get people elected, competence and warmth. So they'll have done, you know, everything in the considerable armoury of spin skills that these people have to make that happen. So there you go. That's it. If you want to be elected, that's what you need to do. Now, next thing I'm going to suggest is that you and the young women and women everywhere that you come into contact with embrace technology. You can put up really good websites these days without knowing any coding at all. My hobby, this is really something to apologise for possibly, is co-running something called WordPress Users Wales. Who's got a WordPress site here? Right, only a few of you. Right, WordPress is open source software, which means that anything about it can be accessed, and it is very well communicated. It's rock solid. Number 10 Downing Street runs on it, built by a company in Swansea, SA80, who, for very obvious reasons, are security experts, massive security experts. We have some fantastic web companies in Wales, actually, amazingly respected and specialist. So WordPress runs about 17% of the web. If you can go onto wordpress.com this afternoon and get yourself a blog up in 5 minutes, it's that easy. Now, it is very important that we learn to do this and that we do it and we teach our daughters and sisters and everybody else to do it, because otherwise we can't communicate. There is a book written by an American media professor, Douglas Rushkoff, called Program or Be Programmed, in which he says, if you can't program, you are going to be receiving and passive. You know, we've got to learn to get these sites up and running and embrace technology. And it is fun. And there are aspects of web design in particular. There's an aspect of web design. Does anybody code here? Right. Well, hopefully you would agree with me that CSS is like putting makeup on. You do HTML, which is like the walls of the buildings, and then you decorate it with something like CSS. And I'm very old, so I remember Bunty comics. Do you remember when you cut out Bunty from the back? Some of you remember. And you put on different dresses. That is what CSS is like. It's wonderful. And women usually love it, because you can prettify whatever you're making online to an infinite degree. So I got this up, We Want Chopsy Women, which would probably actually fly across the web and be trolled and hacked and God knows what, more than many other messages. I got that up in 5 minutes. So, you know, ready-made package on WordPress. So there you go. And it's important to create great content. It's a hackneyed thing people say about the web, which is that your messages must be good, but they're different from messages we've used in conventional media. So there's some basic skills, I think, to get on top of. Image search and editing, not much to that. You just Google what you want. Headline writing, and we need to think Sun rather than thinking, you know, Radio 4. Writing full stop. And writing for the web is much easier than writing literary stuff, because it's like writing like you're talking on local radio, really. That's the best parallel. Creative thinking, courage to work a niche, and opportunism. And here's an example of opportunism that happened last week. Some of you may know about this. A young journalist was listening to Radio 4 and got absolutely incensed that talking about breast cancer, that the 3 experts were all men. And she couldn't believe how Radio 4 couldn't have bothered to get a woman expert to talk about breast cancer. So she set up a Twitter stream which asked the question, does anybody know any women breast cancer experts? And very quickly she got half a dozen. And subsequent to that then, she bunged up this, I'm glad to say it is WordPress, a site which would have taken her 5 minutes at most. And this is a repository for you to put yourself into if you would like to be a media expert, to talk about something on the media. So I'd urge you to all get your names up there, please. And get your friends, neighbours, what have you, up there as well. And it is getting hits and visits because I tracked mine. So where it goes wrong in terms of content is people don't move content enough. It gets boring. They think having a web presence is about an online brochure. It's not. It's about having a chat. There's not enough going on to LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, those sort of things. Too bland, too earnest. A real danger of, you know, people championing equalities. We have to attract, not complain, and not, you know, wear people down with a kind of earnestness, which is grim and particularly loathed online. People don't think enough about the usefulness of their content. They depersonalize it. They speak as to whom it may concern, rather than as a human being. I'm shocked at the number of sites that don't have pictures of the people behind them on them. And they don't localise. That means on the web, you have to be local and global. You've got no choice, actually. And you'll get local people, whether you want them to or not, follow you and contact you. But, you know, it gives us this enormous capacity to go from very small to massive. And people think in terms of tactics, just being reactive rather than a long-term strategy. Everybody needs a long-term media strategy, organisation, enterprise strategy for what they're doing on the web. So there you go. Now, I'd like you to quickly, and I've only got a couple more minutes. Am I right, Rosemary? 2 minutes? Yeah. Okay, just check in with each other now with what are you doing in terms, your organisation, your cause. What are you doing in terms of search? What are you doing with playing with tech? And that marvellous phrase, get it up, which I find great joy when I put a website out, shouting in front of my screen, get it up, and creating great content. Off you go, please. I'm a bit worried about time, so I think I better cut you off, yeah? And you can continue over later in breaks. I just want to rush to the conclusion now, so I don't put the programme out. So, sorry to, take it away and talk about it, eh? But also, most importantly, daughters, you know, if you've got influence in schools, please get kids and daughters doing stuff. I just want to talk, just quickly run through some women in Wales who are doing great stuff online. Anybody know this woman, Dr. Anne-Marie Cunningham? Well, she is championing training GPs and development GP training online. She's everywhere online in her sector, I suppose you'd call it, a specialisation, doing fantastic work. This is a gang of women from all walks of life. There's Hayley there, runs Go Compare, value 400 million, doing interesting stuff online. Jojo, Mam and Baby, the clothing shop. Carol and Chapters just started an arts tech network. Caroline Vasquez, a mashup artist who makes amazing films. Helen Reynolds, social media champion at Monmouth Council, who's got a bunch of Tory councillors, all over 70, tweeting. Amazing stuff going on. You know, so, and they all need celebrating. Here, we have a little star. Stand up, please, Laura. Laura works here for Rosemary, and she is this Oh, you work at Rosemary, sorry, Rosemary works for Laura. I could have gathered that, actually. And this is Laura's amazing and fantastic blog, which is about politics, fashion, and culture. And it's wonderful, it's creative, it's inventive. The girl's going to go far. So just to sum up really quickly then, you know, there are fantastic opportunities on the web. It runs 24 hours. You know, women can fit it in with other things that they're up to. No school tie involved. There is amazing stuff to learn on the web. And it is going to be vital, I think, in helping get really good women in public life in the future. Can I just say to you as well, it's very important, I think, in what you're trying to do, that you run what you're doing organised as an open network rather than an echo chamber, which, for want of a better words, is an echo chamber of equalities industries. You know, it's women in science, tech, engineering. They really need to be invited in and connected to. You know, I urge you all to take a bit of effort and interest in making you, your daughters, your sisters, all women that you know, mistresses of the web. Good luck in that. And thanks for listening. Does anybody want to ask a question? Oh, this is the open source group that I run. It's online, and there's loads of information there, and we have meetings. We have no money. We're nomadic. We go to places that take us in. We went to Swansea on Wednesday with Software Alliance Wales, who kindly hosted us, and we had about 50 people turned up to learn about building online engagement. We don't even have water or coffee, because there's totally no money in it. But it's a learning network for people on the web. Anybody like to ask anything? Oh, yes.
Na fe, diolch yn fawr iawn i chi. Elin Jones Hafal. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi am ddweud geiriau am eich mam ac am eich meddyg teulu chi hefyd o fenyw. Achos mae'n falch iawn i glywed fenyw yn siarad mes a bothi problemau iechyd meddwl sy'n gallu cyfoethogi'n bywydau ni ac yn rhoi pwer i ni. A o'n hefyd yn meddwl am y ffordd i ni bod yn siarad gyda'n gilydd am y ffordd mae menywod yn gallu helpu gilydd, ond mae eisiau ni cael yr hyder i wneud e. A chi wedi rhoi i ni'n ofyn sefyll lan weithio'n gyhoeddus, ond mae'n dde iawn bod chi'n rhoi'r enghraifft i ni o wneud, a hefyd ffordd o wneud e yn dywol fech, ynddo. A trwy'r we. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi am neges ysbrydoledig. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch. Anybody else? Yeah.
O'n i jyst yn mynd i ofyn, oes angen newid y pwyslais mewn ysgolion o ddysgu defnyddio cyfrifiaduron mwyn chwilio ac mwyn cael gwybodaeth i ddysgu siwt mae'n neud coding. Mae yna shift yn digwydd ar hyn o bryd, achos nes o dechreuo dysgu cyfrifiaduron nôl i gemlynedd yn ôl, ond mae pobl wedi stopio dysgu hynna nawr. Oes eisiau newid y pwyslais?
So just sum up, I got most of it. So the last question, the final bit you asked me was in English. Do you mind asking me, because I've got the headphones? Just the end bit.
Do we need to change the focus in schools to teach children how to code?
Well, I hate to, support Michael Gove in any way, but, he said last week about that the aim is to start teaching children. Computing science is mostly terrible in schools. That's what the tech industry believes anyway. And they, I have a very techie son, a 15-year-old, who got a C in GCSE. And I rang the school and said, I can't understand why this kid has got a C, because he's built his own computer, and he's got games online and things like that he's built. And the teacher said to me, it's because he finds it very boring. Microsoft, Excel spreadsheets for kids who can code and make stuff are incredibly boring. So, it would be wonderful, wouldn't it, to have a movement where women technologists and women, computer experts were being encouraged to teach in schools. It would be fantastic. One other question of there, better be my last one, I think.
Sorry. I've got two daughters, 9 and 6, and my eldest, I've actually set up a Twitter account for her, which I know I'm not supposed to, and I'm a bit nervous about it. But so what advice can you give to us as parents to encourage our children in terms of things like Facebook, Twitter, that kind of thing? Log in when they're so little, but they're so enthusiastic.
Yes, well, this is a huge area, right? And it's not my area of expertise. But if you go to a site called Wise Kids, which is run by a friend of mine called Sangi Bala, there's loads of advice there. I would say in the WordPress User Wales group, there's a fantastic guy in Cardiff called Alessio Bernadelli. He's one of 100 top Microsoft world-class educators. He's gone to work for the Times Educational Supplement now. But he came to talk to us about using blogs in school. And he showed 10-year-olds had made PowerPoint presentations about what neurons and electrons were. And 14-year-olds were giving feedback. And there wasn't a dry eye in the house. It was really moving to read these 14-year-olds encouraging these 10-year-olds. So, there's some great stuff. I did check a statistic, apparently 89%, according to Ofcom, of Welsh parents are very happy with the way internet safety is taught in school. But, obviously it's all, it's so new, isn't it, to all of us. Okay, well, thanks for listening. And, get going with the Picsels, girls.
Cynulliad Cenedlaethol Cymru yw'r corff sy'n cael ei ethol yn ddemocrataidd i gynrychioli buddiannau Cymru a'i phobl, i ddeddfu ar gyfer Cymru ac i ddwyn Llywodraeth Cymru i gyfrif. I gael rhagor o wybodaeth ac i ganfod pwy sydd yn eich cynrychioli, ewch i cynhaliodd.cymru.org neu gallwch chi'n dilyn ar Facebook a Twitter.